Episode of the AWG podcast. I am joined here with my right hand man, Kimo Sabi, Greg Fisher,
Yo.
and this afternoon we are joined. It's like the favorite thing every water sport operator wants to hear. Hey guys, FWC's here. They need to talk to you. Like, nobody's ever super excited, I don't think, to talk to you guys, except for me. When we were doing TMBT, when you guys would call, I'd be like, yeah, they're calling, you know. Now I'm sort of back to like, if I see FWC call, I'm like, oh shit, what do they want?
We're used to that. We're used to that.
Yeah, man. How are you guys doing this afternoon?
Doing well, and you all?
Man, we're doing awesome, and on the other end of the microphone here it's Captain, right? Nicholas Korade.
No, Lieutenant.
Lieutenant. I always screw those up.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, maybe we could get some favorable legal stuff if you're higher ranking, man. Come on, get your law degree, Nick. Let's go, man. And then Brian Rehwinkel. Brian, go ahead, and if you guys just want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, I'll let you guys do that.
Morning or afternoon. Lieutenant Nicholas Korade with Florida Fish and Wildlife. I work in the boating and waterways section.
Hey, good morning, Brian Rehwinkel. I work in the boating and waterways section as well, working in boating safety education and outreach. But really happy to be here with y'all.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you guys. I know there's a lot of hoops about stuff you guys do in media and stuff like that, and how busy you guys are all the time with stuff. So we do appreciate you coming on, and we had Seth on, Seth Wagner, who had your job right before Nicholas.
Correct. Yep.
Nick, Jesus, I'm like, hey, look at man, I'm like, yes sir, no sir. Immediately, I get cop anxiety, man. I'm like, yes, no. Here's my license and registration. Please don't write me a ticket.
Yeah, Kevin's used to that, by the way. Yeah, he's dealt with that a long time.
It's not true.
Multiple
It's not
times.
true. I don't have a single thing on my record, man. Don't let the knuckle tattoos fool you. I did go to jail. I never want to go back. I'm kidding.
He's not kidding.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. Yeah, so I wanted to reason we wanted to have you guys on. It's like my favorite subject, SB 606 and new regulations and legislation, and I know. FWC doesn't necessarily have like a marketing arm, or this. You guys are not like exactly the Facebook over there. You know what I mean? So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to sort of come on our platform and maybe just shine a little bit of light on everything since last we talked with FWC, and we had Seth on the show. I think it was 2 years ago, Greg, at least.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, so we were still going into like the education, and honestly, I still feel like we're like in the education but people are still kind of like, oh, wait, what does this mean? What has changed? I'm not exactly 100% sure. So, the big one, which has got everybody in the group sort of like wanted to see clarity, was not a change in legislation, just a change in how the FWC is interpreting it. Would that be a correct way of kind of illustrating the sort of the?
You're the 18-year-old, right? 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the new kid on the block here. So when I came in, there was a lot of things that kind of got baptism by fire, drinking through a fire hose, and some of the stuff that I wasn't too familiar with. Obviously, we run everything through legal. It's not just me shooting from the hip answering questions, but yeah, one of the ones that's come up that I've gotten questions from the public, from livery operators, they come into our main boating or waterways phone line is, the 18 years or older to lease or rent a livery vessel, excluding a human-powered vessel. So the way legal has interpreted that is anybody, I've got the statute pulled up, so I have everything if I need to cross-reference, but anyone can't lease or rent a livery vessel to anyone under the age of 18 and have knowledge that they're leasing or renting. So basically, if the example I like to give folks is if a father and son show up and they're like, hey, I want to rent 2 jet skis for the day. And, the dad's obviously say 40 years old or so, and the son say 16. if the livery knowingly knows that that other jet ski is being used for that person under 18, that is not allowed by that definition in state statute. And the section, in case you all aren't real familiar, is 32754 parent 6.
All right. So I'm going to what we call pushback on this a little bit. So
Okay.
I want you to steel man this argument for me. Firstly, why? Boy, so when I looked at the FWC report on accidents, there wasn't anything glaring that showed a preponderance of evidence that would suggest that that 0 to 8 or 14 to 18 demographic. In fact, because I don't have it directly in front of me, but there was like the lowest reportable accident category of all of the ages. There was something like 0 to 4 accidents. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't know if you have that in front of you, the FWC findings in the 2023 accident report. So where's the change? Why did we change this? Because it's not legislatively changed. You can still be 16 and drive a jet ski legally, a personally owned jet ski, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So, and that's kind of the big thing where some of this confusion kind of comes in, is that in the state of Florida, if I own a jet ski and as long as I'm over 14, I can operate that jet ski legally. However, when we start dealing with a livery vessel, so a vessel that's rented or leased to somebody, that's when this kind of takes precedent over that. So that specific section that parent 6 deals with, that livery's knowledge. So if the example, like I said before, if, a father and son show up to rent a jet ski and, I can't rent it to the son, but conversely, say down the road, a couple hours later, an officer stops the son on the jet ski and says, "Hey, where did you get this jet ski?" "Oh, well, I rented it." Okay. And the officer follows back up with the livery and they say, "No, it was the father that, rented it. We just rented one out." That's outside the livery's control. And so that specific section is really where we're addressing the livery's knowledge of that. And then also when you start talking about ages is when we start getting into that contractual agreement. So I can't enter into an agreement with anyone that's under 18 years of age. So if I'm renting a jet ski as the son, I'm entering in that contract, which would be, a problem.
So here's my next pushback. And not that I want to give anybody any bright ideas, but then wouldn't that nullify their ability to even be on as a rider then? Because the parent is signing for that person from a liability standpoint to get on that machine or that boat. They're still entering into the minors then entered in their contract by, and I'm not a lawyer. Don't let the neck tattoos fool you. I did not go to Harvard Law, but they're entering into contract as a rider still, or as a participant, wouldn't they be?
No, because the way our legal has looked at it, and again, any of this stuff that comes up that I don't know, I'm certainly the first to admit I'll be happy to walk down in legal and ask and get some more clarifying.
Well, I don't. You're fine. Last thing I need you telling me next year is that I can't have any kids on my boat anymore at all, or jet skis.
No, but it's the person renting it. So if they're coming to that livery and they're renting that livery vessel, whatever that happens to be, a pontoon boat, a jet ski, as long as it's not a human powered vessel, because we have some direction in there, I can't rent that jet ski. So if I'm renting that as the parent, I'm taking on that rental responsibility as the parent.
And so they can't enter into a contract then for a human powered vessel or a kayak or a SUP.
Correct. Yes, that they can. That's outlined in statute. Yes.
And Kevin, here's another thing to consider. When you have a contract with someone to rent a personal watercraft, one of those persons on that contract is responsible for damage, things like that. Correct? You're not expecting the passenger. There's somebody who assigned that contract. Correct?
Yeah.
And that's really what this is focusing on, is who was responsible for that vessel, who was operating it. They must be 18 or older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done 18 and older. We started last year when our insurance changed that policy. And I will say it was, we definitely saw a huge, 25, 30% decrease. And I mean, that could have been for a myriad of reasons. Obviously, we don't have that completely parsed out data that says, but I would anticipate this is definitely going to come as, because there's some companies that this is something that they've stood by for a long time. Jet skis are obviously, when we get that call, we just anecdotally you hear it when they're like, oh, I'm 60, I want my son to drive it, and we're like, no, can't do it. They're more than likely to than to get on as a passenger, but they can't actually operate the jet ski from our docks. And obviously, we're not telling them that. But if you go out there, you know what I mean, and they jump on, like, we didn't see it.
Yeah.
But I would guess though, that that's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, not from my side. I'm not going to engage in that game, but who this law was sort of and rules were sort of intended for is like, it's going to hurt the good operators, but the guys that haven't been playing by the games will circumvent it. Like I think we see this all, and it's neither here nor there, but
we see that with anything. You get folks that'll say, "Oh, well, that's what it says. I can operate in this gray area or find a way around it." At the end of the day, the goal of all of this is safety. And, we want to educate folks. We want people to go out and have a good time and enjoy the water and then come home safely. You get in that situation. No one wants to be that phone call from our side as an LE or your side as a livery operator. Nobody wants that phone call that, hey, yeah, you remember that kid that you sort of kind of told the dad, yeah, let him ride it when he goes out there? Well, he just wrapped himself around a channel marker and now we're dealing with that. That's what we're trying to do. I get the side of, well, it's hurting, impact on business and things like that, but the ultimate goal is safety for everybody, and that's kind of where we're focused on.
Kevin, real quick, I got a couple things. I think it's pretty clear of what the interpretation is from what you've explained it. Mm-hmm. Now let's kind of take it to the next level here of like enforcement. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a lot of not everyone in Florida listens to the AWG. Mm-hmm. Most don't, and they're going to still continue rent to 16 and 17-year-olds. So how is the FWC handling the education and the enforcement part of this new, well, I wouldn't say new interpretation, but
I mean, it is sort of new.
Yeah, new, yeah. Okay, so how are you going about, because obviously there's some people who have no idea, they've been doing it for 20 years. Kevin and I know those people. How are you handling it when you discover that they're renting to 16 and 17-year-olds?
So a lot of times when we get new changes or something comes up, a question, and it's in an area with things like that, we try to, message that out to our officers. We encourage when we get phone calls from liveries that say, hey, I heard this. I had one the other day, a gentleman called and had questions about, accident reporting and things like that. So you got to go through those questions and kind of help everybody. But the big thing is getting our officers, because I'm stuck in an office in Tallahassee. But, our officers that are out there in the field, we try to pass the, hey, we're seeing this in your area from us up in Tallahassee, and we kind of put a lot of weight on our officers in the field to go out and educate those liveries. Stop in, not just, whenever there's a violation. Build a rapport with them. Go out there and say, hey, there's some new changes. There's some new laws. Do you all have questions? And on the other side, if there's things out there that liveries are hearing from, this podcast or, online, a message group or whatever, reach out to us and say, hey, we're hearing this. What do y'all think? So that way we can, kind of address things. There's been changes, that have come up based on input from the public. Hey, this really isn't working for us. Have we thought about this or thought about that? And it kind of gets the conversation going and moves to, a resolution, because we're not, even though we do write citations and warnings and things like that, our ultimate goal is compliance and education. We want to get folks to be in compliance so everyone's safe, and sometimes that's a conversation and a handshake, or sometimes that ends up being a citation or a warning. It just kind of depends, but our ultimate goal is to get everybody to follow the rules and regulations and be on the same page.
So you're saying that it starts with, if you find an operator that is renting the 16 and 17-year-olds knowingly, it starts with a conversation with the operator or warning, or how would you approach, or how would most officers approach a situation like this? So
I'll kind of use myself as an example. So when a lot of the livery regulations first started coming out, I was an officer in Wakulla County. I kind of took it on myself to kind of go to different liveries in the area and say, hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? And kind of sit down and have a conversation and then, talk through things and be available for questions and kind of go through that. As that sort of progresses, though, if I start stopping their livery vessels and there's violations, I want to try to figure out, is it something that maybe the operator didn't know? Maybe I need to go back to the livery and talk to them, or maybe it's a problem with, that person individual, has nothing to do with the livery. But it kind of starts with that initial conversation. And then if I have a problem that I keep seeing over and over and over again, then that's when we start changing our enforcement action. So it might be the first time a conversation or a written warning, just say, hey, we talked about this, it's documented. And then it's, hey, I've already talked to you 2 or 3 times about this and it's not really changing. Here's a citation, or here's a this, work through that process. So yeah, I don't want to come out of the gate swinging with a hammer. So
yeah. And we appreciate that, definitely. I think as a community, and something that I hear, that I parrot in our group constantly. And I really don't want to send an avalanche of people to your doorstep. So somebody's always like, oh, is it some guy? And then typically I'll go into the DMs and I'll be like, hey, it's Nick Korade. He's works Division Boating and Waterways. He is the guy that handles with all this stuff and deals with all the field officers. So I'm like, send him an email, have a conversation. Because I always open dialogue and communication, I think, is the cornerstone of responsible legislation, responsible operation, responsible education. I say it time and time again. Sometimes I have to tell somebody something 100 times, and it doesn't click until you hit that 101st. So if there's any kind of ambiguity or uncertainty, the only way that gets cleared up is with a conversation and understanding. Hence the reason why you guys are on this show, because I can deliver it with one time and say, hey, this is what I'm like 101% sure I'm at. Now is why I take my boat test, and we're talking with these guys on a regular basis about rule changes and law changes. Like, I'm 100% certain, but they're not until they hear it from directly from FWC. So
yeah.
I think that's like something you keep on saying is like, hey, let's have a conversation. And so that's why I'm always like, well, I'm not going to answer this question for FWC. Yeah. Like, here's Nick's email and talk to him.
Absolutely. And I've certainly I'm busy, as we all are, but I'm happy to help. And a lot of this stuff is, in your individual areas, talk to your local officers too. I mean, They know a lot of these same things. They know all the same things I do. I'm just the guy that's up here in Tallahassee that deals with it more than most. But, have a conversation with them. And, I get phone calls from officers just the same as I get phone calls from the general public or livery operators with stuff. And again, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not the end all be all of knowledge, but I certainly know how to run down someone that has the answer if I don't.
So something when I first initially posted in the group, and a lot of legacy operators like, man, I've been doing this business for 20, 30 years, and we've like, why now? So it's something that I've alluded to earlier, but why is it? I mean, it's not a law change; it's an interpretation. So why now? Is it just because? Are you guys seeing more liveries come into the business? Is that part of it? And like,
well, there are definitely a lot of people who are entering this business, but that's a dynamic that's always there. There are people coming and there are people going. I would say this: when it comes to the legislation, when you look and see how it's written, we may talk about it being a new interpretation, but to me, looking at this, it's pretty clear that the legislature could have said something else. They could have said, hey, listen, you can't enter into a contract if you're under 18 and rent a livery. And rent a powered motorized craft. But the way it's written, it just says you can't knowingly lease or rent to someone under that age. And keep in mind, Kevin and Greg, this is something that the Florida legislature can change if they want to. This isn't something put in place by FWC. We have to enforce it, and I just want to make sure it's clear that this is not something that we created, and the interpretation itself is something that we have to get from legal. But even if we hadn't gone to legal, when you look at that, I think it's pretty clear the way it says it.
So when your contention been like, well, it's always really been like this, you guys have we've kind of been like maybe operating in a gray area for the last 20 to 30 years would be your contention.
Well, I think that time frame's a little long because
I don't know.
Yeah.
This is just again.
No,
this isn't even necessarily my pushback. It's
Yeah,
just
no,
what people in the group have
I
asked
know
us.
operators in the late '90s that were renting to 16 and 17-year-olds, so it goes
Yeah,
back quite a ways.
and we'd have to go back and look and to see what changes are there, because there have been changes over the year in some of the statute. And I don't think we could tell you today, if there have been any changes, but I do think that when you go and you read this now, to me, it's pretty clear what it's saying, and whether or not that interpretation has changed over the years, we'd have to go back and look at that quite honestly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I'd like to pivot to the other one that where this again it does seem like it's changed as far as the accident reporting, and Brian, you and I talked a little bit about it before the show. I think so. Operators have always operated under the auspices that they didn't have to report an accident unless there was damages in $2,000 or more, or an accident requiring medical attention. But however, now, and correct me if I'm wrong, or if this is another interpretation or something that I'm that maybe our audience may misunderstand. Now it's like a reportable accident. Like any accident is now considered a reportable accident. So even like this minor damage, stub a toe, whatever it may be. Can you maybe walk us through that and explain what that looks like?
Yeah, so if you look at statute, and again, that's where we're pulling all this stuff from, is 327.30, which deals with our accident reporting criteria. So when you look at that, it kind of breaks down the duties and responsibilities of the operator of that vessel. And it says that basically, if I'm involved in an accident and I have a fatality, somebody is missing, injury beyond first aid, damage greater than $2,000 of property vessel, and then, a complete and total loss of the vessel, that I'm required by state statute to report that accident. What we then do with that report is it gets, entered into our system and sent to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard compiles this data from the entire country. Those thresholds, the fatality, injury beyond first aid, greater than $2,000 in damage, is the reportable criteria. Just because it's under that $2,000 limit doesn't mean it's not an accident anymore. It's just not a reportable criteria for an accident to be reported to the Coast Guard. Now, pivoting a little bit, when you look at 327.54, it says, I'll pull it up here, the exact parent, I think, is parent 9. And parent 9 says, if a vessel rented or leased by a livery is involved in an accident, the livery must report that accident to the division. So basically, the livery statute kind of supersedes that and says, hey, you're operating as a rented vessel. We're taking away that, not taking away, we're taking that reportable threshold and kind of enhancing it to any accident. Obviously, a couple jet skis bumping into a dock or bumping into each other, we still have a collision or an elision in that instance, but we might not meet that threshold. Kind of the thing I like to explain to people is it's a good idea to at least call and let us know, as it says in statute, because what that does is if a week or 2 weeks later, the person comes back to their insurance company or their attorney and says, hey, my neck hurts, I bumped in that dock and they didn't do anything, and they come back. If you as a livery operator report that, as you're supposed to, officer comes out, they're going to take information, they're going to probably do what's called a self-report, which is, for lack of a better term, the same as a driver exchange of information that you would have in an auto accident. And we're documenting that so that if something comes back, the livery can say, nope, I had an accident report done by FWC. Here's the self-report. And it's kind of a coverage and a liability aid to the livery. So,
yeah,
man, I feel like you guys are getting in the insurance game, man.
So
I
got to follow up.
I'll buy a policy from you today if this is what it takes to make my life easier, man.
No, but it's a documentation thing and covers the livery for any of those instances that might happen. It's hard. We run into it a lot when I have officers do reports for self-report or a full report. anybody that has a boat that's gone to a marine supply store and tried to replace a cleat or anything knows it's not cheap to replace stuff. So damage can be pretty expensive pretty quick. So it's one of those things where documenting it, even if it falls under one category or the other, it's documenting that too as kind of a coverage thing.
Nick, I get, so this is where it's like it gets really difficult for operators, because if I sneeze, I can throw out my back. And I've there's been times where I was on a jet ski and I was, docking it, and you know how you go up those rolling ramps and sometimes you got to jolt it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could throw my back out, and I've actually seen this happen because I had a jet ski business for 3 years, and I mean, they literally hit a pylon, and like they threw out their, I don't know. It's just like, so this happens every single day. Little incidents happen, and wouldn't that be just kind of a waste of resources for everyone to report every minor thing? Because if there's no restrictions or criteria on the word incident, then it can literally be anything. And then let's say that they hit a pylon, nothing damaged, but they hit a pylon, and then the person calls back, says, "Oh, I'm in the ER because I can't walk now." And then FWC comes and says, "Well, you didn't report it, but it was something very minor and which someone wouldn't think that would cause." Or like you're on a boat and you stub your toe. Where does where's the silver lining to all this?
Greg, I would say this. This is Brian. I would say this.
Okay.
It's something when legislation is written, it's not going to address every single topic, and so I think it's fair to say that from a business standpoint, there are going to have to be decisions made for the livery operation as to what rises to a threshold. As Nick mentioned, if you have a couple of boats that rub rails and there's no damage, there's no, the boats do touch each other. Or another example of, technically speaking, if you pull a personal watercraft in and you ground it intentionally, you could make the argument that you grounded that vessel, but that's not a boating accident. So if it's something that happens an awful lot, I think that's something that our officers will be prepared for, but it still is something that the legislature or that the statute says, again, pretty clearly, that you're supposed to report those accidents. And it doesn't say reportable accident, it says accidents, which is going to, as Nick said, is going to go beyond that envelope of what's listed in a boating accident. So that would be tough to I certainly hear what you're saying is there could be numerous calls, but there's also going to be some decision making that the livery owners are going to have to say, well, listen, there's no damage. These two boats rubbed rails. We're not calling FWC for that.
So what you're saying, it's somewhat ambiguous.
Well,
when it comes to the threshold, because statute says accident. Well, what's the definition of accident? Is it a stub your toe?
Yeah, it doesn't define it. It's defined as a reportable accident. Correct.
So here's my concern, right? So we had one incident, no injuries, jet ski got damaged, and we reported it. FWC came out. They're like, "Man, you got like the cleanest looking letters on your jet skis. Everything looks great." And then he proceeded to go through every single one of my boats, count all of my life jacket, boats that were docked, boats that weren't out, and issued me 3 citations on the spot. Well, I don't think they were misdemeanors. Maybe they were warnings years ago. And and it was like had everybody and his second cousin and his brother out there. So now a part of these new regulations is like there's a 3-strike rule there. So at what point is there an officer that, somebody switches out and they go, "No, you knew." "No, man, the sick kid was on the back of the jet ski." "No, you knew. I'm issuing a citation." And then somebody bumps their back and just again, like the concerning portion for me is there seems to be like with both of these things, like a fair amount of ambiguity. like even in the renting, like, well, if they go out and they switch, then you're not at your fault, but it's going to be really up to the officer. So if he feels like, hey man, no, you're telling them that they can go out, and I'm like, no, we're not, like, we're not at all. But he wants to issue me a citation. Per the law, technically, if I were to get 3 citations for any one of these things, I could technically have my livery permit revoked. Correct?
Yeah, there's some sections in there that state, certain violations, repeat offenses, things like that. Definitely, you can have your livery permit revoked and suspended. That's certainly something that's out there. Again, each situation is different. I hate to give kind of this standard answer, but the officer that arrives and the officer that's dealing with that specific incident, it's their discretion as to how they're going to deal with that. Mm-hmm. They rely on statute and rule to kind of, set forth what the requirements are. And it's their, discretion. If they're doing an investigation and, all the totality of those circumstances come to light, that officer might decide, no, I think this is just going to be a conversation, or this might be a warning or something like that. Again, it's kind of every situation is unique. So,
but they quite literally have the power to put me out of business then.
The way it's been outlined by the legislature with the statutory requirements or penalties, that's the way it's set up. Yeah. That is an option.
Yeah. Kevin, Greg, yeah. let me step in as somebody who's not a sworn officer. Let me just give you a sense of this. When you look at the number of interactions our officers have, I've had people say, "Oh, every time I have an interaction with an officer, I get a citation," and I'm not there. I don't know. I can't be a witness to something that when I wasn't present. But when you look at the statistics and you look at this in the totality, most of our officers' work is educational for people, is talking to people. And so I realize it's easy to focus on the more the harsher thing like a citation. But the reality is, and I want to bring this back in, that the reality is almost all of the interactions are what I would consider positive, in the sense that there's not a citation issued. Yeah. And it is talking to people about that. And I don't want us to get too far away from that and just talking about the most extreme citation or what I would consider an outlier.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree.
I agree.
We spoke with some of the local FWC officers, and they kind of admitted that there are some overzealous officers that are more, they're more about writing citations than they are education. But those are, again, like you said, they're outliers, and most of them are about education. And and like we talked to. Who's the state rep, Kevin?
Adam Batana.
Adam Batana. Adam always said that if there's ever a situation like that he want to know about it, because he says he doesn't believe that it's a problem with FWC. But like any company, I even have employees that are just a little more aggressive than the others. So it is what it is. But I agree. These are outlying cases. And for most of my interactions with FWC, it's been educational, and they really want to see us do well and follow the rules and be successful. That's just my
absolutely. It's the underlying goal of this is, like you just said, you hit the nail on the head. We want to educate folks. We want people to follow the rules and be safe and have a good time. Even though statute has penalties and things in there, everything has that in statute, whatever section you're in. Our goal as FWC is not to put people out of business. It's not to shut down the number of liveries there are. We want to encourage people to come and start a business and do that. But
there we go. That's what I was goading you into. That's what I was trying to get you to say. So and like Nick, we've had Brian all. We've done this. We've beat this to death. I know where you guys stand, but you do have to understand that this is when guys start hearing this stuff and they're, you know what I mean? They're like, oh my God, remember that one FWC officer we dealt with? And if it's like, I was told by a county commissioner one time that you're judged by the worst operator in your business, in your sector, right? And I definitely feel like some of these, I'm a pretty, government overreach, XYZ. I'm a capitalist, I'm a business guy. So I tend to lean in that direction where I'm like, oh man, this seems like overreachy, but I get it. I understand. And I know you guys are on the other side of that. But I think both has to hold true. Right, so whereas we're judged by the worst of our business, and we have things like SB 606. I think guys that haven't been in the room with you guys and haven't had these conversations with FWC, where there's a little bit of an education process back and forth, would lean toward like some of those things that I alluded to. Like, man, so like do we like as a business operator, like is this something that you would be concerned of? Like, should we really just like do you you'll get 25 calls a day from me to make sure I'm in compliance. My guys will be like, hey man, customer, I'm not sure if it's a nail clipping or he stubbed his toe, but we're gonna need some officers out here. You guys are gonna
what we're talking about is a positive, because communication needs to be ongoing. Because there are going to be questions that come up that are new, or something that someone is genuinely confused about, and I think that's something that is important for us to continue to have this kind of communication.
Yeah. So and we're getting towards the end of the show, but I one of the things I'm hearing is that we probably need to work with our legislators to kind of define a couple things, especially the accident criteria. Like, that's one thing that's kind of sticking with me, is if I'm an operator, every day there's little things that are happening. They're bumping into pylons, they're stubbing their toe, they're out, they put an anchor down and cut themselves. It's like, what really defines an incident? Because it's very ambiguous. Like, to me, like, that's something that I would like to see there to be more context on.
Well, to take the other side of that, Greg, like, and Brian and I talked about it a little bit more at length, but I also think there's it's like, well, do you need to call FWC like every 5 minutes because someone stubbed their toe or somebody came in? And again, to like a little more clarity on that, I think too, and something I talked with Brian, like if it happens out there and we're not made aware of it, then this isn't not a, but I could be wrong on this, and either one of you guys feel free to correct me, but if it doesn't happen within our purview, if it happens on the water and no one told us, and there's not like that ski's not coming back in two pieces, and somebody had a fender bender and went over the handles or whatever, we can't be held to that if they didn't report it to us, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not made aware of it and you don't find out about it, and the way you find out is, the next day some, average citizen comes pulling up to your dock and says, hey, see this big dent in the side of my boat? One of your rental jets did it yesterday. Obviously an officer's not going to go, oh, they didn't report it. Well, if you don't know about it, you're not going to be able to report it. So
I think it's like common sense on both sides, right? So if you got a fist-sized hole in your jet ski and it's like $700 worth of damage, you have to charge that. File an incident, put it internal incident report, and then let me get a little bit more clarity on this. If this does happen, so what should be our protocol then? So if it's something where if like me and the customer, I filed an internal incident report. Like, let's just say that now I am, like, quite honestly, we probably will be like engaging in this and calling you guys more. But it's like, there's a certain level of common sense. But I mean, is it in my like incumbent upon me to make sure like the person stays there? If they're like, let's just say, for example, there was an incident, we had to charge them for damage. They're like, we're fine to pay the damage and we have dinner at 5:00. Do I have to be like, no, you have to stay here for FWC? How does that work?
So basically, we don't want people getting in that situation where you're holding people to stay and not letting them leave and do that. If people are going to leave, you've got their information written down on a piece of paper on the agreement, so we can go and do that. I'm the state's final reviewer for boating accidents. There's a number of livery-related boating accidents that I review that are, hey, the livery called us and they said this damage happened. The people have taken off. Here's the information. And the officer does an investigation and follows back up with those folks. So, certainly don't want livery operators put in that position where they're trying to hold people at the dock and deal with all that. Get as much information as you can and then call us and let us do our job and deal with that.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, that's well, we want to make sure everybody's compliant. And Greg, don't mind if we go over a little bit. I don't know what these guys' schedules look like, but there's just a couple other things in the email if you guys wanted to touch on. I mean, general, I mean, those were the two big ones I really wanted to touch on, but
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything that you guys would you guys like in that, in that list of things that you want to touch on that
So
you'd like to provide clarity on?
yeah, there's two things I wanted to kind of touch on, and I'll let Brian speak after. But the two things, one is, if you're not familiar with our website, the livery regulations page, where it kind of has everything linked to there, kind of start to finish. Am I a livery? How do I apply for a livery permit? Where do I send it? What do I need? Links to all the forms is on there. And one of those forms that I want to touch on is the pre-ride and pre-rental attestation form. So that's a form that's gone through some changes with, 606 coming into play, and then, the progression through there. There's been some new versions. The latest version out now, there's two of them. There's a motorized pre-ride and pre-rental form and a non-motorized or human-powered form. So the main change with that has been, in the original form, it was an all-in-one. Even after it split, it required the renter as well as the person providing the instruction to initial each one of those boxes to say, hey, I've received this block of instruction, I've received that block of instruction. And then at the bottom, both had to initial or sign that form. The latest iteration of both those forms did away with the instructor initial box, so it's just the renter box. They can mark down, I've received this block, I've received that block. They both are, the renter and the person providing instruction, are still required to sign the bottom, but it did away with that initial box for the instructor. The caveat to that is, and this is something that folks say, well, this form, I don't need to talk about this piece or that piece on there. And on the form, it says if the livery feels that that particular block of instruction is not important, let's say you're renting canoes or kayaks and the block about the boater safety education is on there. Obviously, a non-motorized vessel doesn't need to have a boater safety ID card, even though we encourage folks to get boater safety education. They can simply write NA in there. It does come with a little bit of a caveat to say if, you didn't mark down that you covered navigational aids with the renter and, they end up running into a channel marker. There's probably going to be a conversation with that investigator or that officer with the livery to say, why did you feel it wasn't important to cover this particular block? But the whole premise behind it is to kind of streamline it, make it a little bit easier for liveries to kind of go through this checklist so it's not as cumbersome. It's available in electronic format. Some liveries are doing it digitally, which is fine. But again, the underlying thing is we need to make sure that whatever block is covered on there, there is some type of accountability to say that that renter has received that block of instruction.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit on that. So if you do deliver it digitally via I mean, technically they could do this before they get there. Your guy could sign off on it and they could all go off and technically have not gone over everything or anything.
So there's
actually.
some components that have to be done in person, like for the motorized section, the on-water demo and check ride. That's something that obviously we're not going to be able to do beforehand. And certainly we're not in the position to kind of give folks business advice or tell them how to do it. We've had some liveries say, hey, what if, we have 10 or 12 people that want to come rent for us all at once? It's a cumbersome process to go through this. Can we create a video that we play and then they watch it and then they sign off on it? And, again, there's been some avenues. I know other states have processes where it's an online platform where they watch videos and they go over and at the end of each block, they sign off that say, hey, I've received this block of instruction on, nav aids or on local area hazards. So if you're doing it in a digital format or in the paper format, the underlying thing is, and it's outlined in statute, that somebody at that livery has to sign that that renter received that block of instruction. So if, God forbid, there is an accident and the investigator or the officer comes back, they're going to need to figure out who delivered that instruction and how was that instruction delivered.
So would you even recommend? So I know that we've actually done this in the past where you're like, hey, call up FWC, like, yes, we listen to Awkward Watersports Guys. Yes, we went to the website. You know what? We want to call in like a self-imposed livery inspection before season kicks off to make sure that we're doing everything 100% to compliance and best practices. Is that something that the FWC still does, where they'll take like a voluntary officer and come out and check off all the boxes on your livery to make sure that you're in compliance with everything?
I mean, I can't speak for everywhere in the state. I know for me and my time in the field, if a livery called me and said, hey, season's coming up, it's my slow time, I want to make sure I'm up to speed, can you come through and go through it? I would be more than happy to come to that livery and go through everything and, use that as that conversation time to sit down and talk about, hey, here's some of the new things that might have changed. Oh, I see you're using the old attestation form. Here's the new one. Let's go through a mock inspection on your boat and kind of go through it and make sure everything is there and that you're going through all the things and components that you need to.
What if you got the wrong guy, man? Could you the guy be like, oh yeah, I'd love to come out there and do a self-imposed
Well, yeah.
write you 75 tickets and put you out of business? Like, no, dude,
Well,
I just want to have a conversation with you, man.
That goes back to, that rapport. So you definitely want to, just like we encourage, our officers in whatever area they're patrolling to build that rapport with their, liveries in that area. We encourage the liveries to reach out to our officers and build a rapport. If you see them on the water, wave at them, stop them, ask them a question, engage in that conversation. So, it's not we're showing up at the worst possible time. There was an accident or, something like that happened. We're there in, a casual encounter kind of thing. So.
Kevin, did we lose you?
I think Kevin disappeared.
Yeah, he disappeared. Let me he disappeared. Oh.
Maybe he didn't like my answer.
Maybe he's having a livery inspection.
Maybe. He'll come back here. Let me see it. Resetting the router. I have to pick up my kid. He said he lost his router, just went on.
Ooh.
Oh.
Well, I'll just close it out. I'll just close it out. And we... He says give 2 minutes.
Okay.
This is why we edit the show. You never know what could happen. Oh. You guys have kids?
I had a 5-year-old daughter. Yep.
Yeah.
How about you?
I have a 9 and a 12-year-old. So they're. My one is he's Halloween. He's ready to go. Trick or treating and all that. My oldest, my daughter, she just wants to go walk around and be seen.
Mm-hmm.
She's at that age.
Yeah, my daughter this Halloween and last Halloween, she told us what my wife and I were going to be wearing. So it was, I'm doing this, you and mommy are doing this. I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Oh, there he is. So Kevin, I got to leave in 5 minutes to pick up my daughter.
All right. Well, yeah, man. So that is, I think we got it from the what do you call it? From the horse's mouth. I couldn't remember that turn of phrase. But we wanted to get you guys in here, bring everybody up to date. I definitely think it's all a good thing. I had to make you guys steel man all of your arguments a little bit. We've got a great relationship. We've done all the communication with you guys, but we want everybody else to be on the exact same page as you and I are.
I think that's great. I really do, because I think I was being very serious about the communication, because we don't always see everything exactly the same way. But if we have discussions and ask questions, and even if they're difficult questions, we can provide the answer that, people like it or they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
but it's a fair answer, and I think that's something that is important. So I can't tell you, we certainly appreciate both of you and your time, and because I think it's important to do this.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, any other parting thoughts that you guys have that you guys want to share with our listenership before we get you guys out of here, or what? Are you guys going to be at the symposium? Will FWC be at the Parasail Symposium?
Yes, Captain Bryant and I will be there at the Parasail Symposium. I believe the panel that we're going to be on, so we'll be there, and we'll be hanging around if folks have questions. I know we're kind of busy and all over the place. We try to go to a lot of these events and things. I try to make it over to Destin for the events that they have. But any of the listeners or any of the folks that you guys come in contact with, again, I'm genuine about this. I know it'll probably blow up my email inbox or my phone, but if they've got questions or things like that I can help with, or put them in touch with some officers in their area that happy to do that and happy to help out.
It'll blow up your inbox with the best operators. That would no, I mean that. I think that and that's the most important thing, right? Because the ones that are actually taking the time to reach out and create that relationship with you.
You're so true. That is so right.
And that's a really good thing to know, is that our officers are out there. They're doing a lot of things, but they can't be everywhere. So y'all are in the industry. Y'all are in the business. If there's things you're seeing and things that we need to be made aware of, that's all great information that we want to know. Hey, I'm trying to do the right thing, but this guy over here is, he's skirting under the radar, those kind of things. We want to know about that. We want to get to that, because like you said earlier, one bad apple spoils the bunch, so to speak. So,
all right, I'd like to rat out get a boat setter right now. Get my boat, man. Go bring down those guys, and I'll be good. All right, guys. Well, again, we appreciate your time. Thank you guys for coming out. And if those of you guys who are attending the WSIA Parasail Symposium, go buy Nick a Diet Coke or whatever it is he does, because he's really straight-laced, man. Don't let the khakis and the boots fool you and the badge. He does it by the numbers, man. This one, I tried to buy him a beer at NASBA, and he's like, no.
You did.
I was inciting it constantly. Like, come on, man, let your hair down, Nick. Come on. Awesome, guys. Thanks again. And everybody, thanks for listening. If you need to get a hold of Nick or Brian, what's your guys' emails? How can they reach out to you?
So mine is Nicholas, NICHOLAS .Korade, KORADE @myfwc.com.
And mine is Brian, BRIAN Rehwinkel, R as in Roger, EHWINKEL @myfwc.com.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys. We appreciate your time, and have a wonderful afternoon. And as always,
keep it awkward.
See y'all.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.